Hello, my name is Spencer Reese, and I won a junior tournament for a laptop. And the day after, I conceded my friend in the final, so he would do the same. It's a pretty stock fairy list. We started our playtesting with PV-DDR's fairy list, and we decided that 3 Vendilion Click were too many, so we cut one for one of Warhammer, which is really good. We cut a Sunken Ruins for another island, because I really like Ancestral Visions on turn 1.
How did we come to the decision on 2 Shock in the sideboard?
Basically, Faeries is a pretty absurd deck, and the only time you really lose is when they play a Magus of the Moon, which shuts down your entire deck. So Shock is just a 1-mana instant speed answer to Magus of the Moon. Murder Shred Cap requires you to tap out in your main phase, which means they can just drop another Magus. Shock allows you to kill their Magus and still hold counter mana up. The rest of the sideboard is pretty stock. We have Razormane Massacres, which come in against decks of Magus and against Elves. We have Damnations, which come in against Elves and Merfolk, and occasionally like Doran or like Kithkin or whatever like creature deck you run into. Glut Seasons come in against a lot of like slower things. They come in against the Fairy Mirror, Revelark, Merfolk on the draw. Bala Gnomes are obviously against the red deck, which is very popular this weekend, and Shock against any deck with Magus.
What are your matchups like with this particular list as compared to other ones?
I feel like Elves is better. Like I won a lot of games on Elves and the Grinders and yesterday because of the one that locks on Warhammer. If you draw it, it's very good against them. It's also good against red deck. Other than that, it really isn't too different than stock Faeries. It's like a lot different from the list Paul Cheon played. I don't know how good his Shadow Mage Infiltrators are, but he's in top 8 of Nationals, so
fair enough,
probably
yeah.
Pretty good.
A lot of people have been cutting the Fairy Conclaves because they say that they're too slow, they don't want their lands coming into play tapped. How are they for you?
They've never really been a problem. Like I have 5, 9, 13 sources to cast Ancestral Visions on turn 1, and that's the only 1-drop play in the deck. And like, PV made top 8 of Approach with only 12 sources. As long as you get Ancestral Visions on turn 1, you can afford to play Fairy Conclave like any time. You have 25 lands, so you can usually make all of your drops and then like on turn 5 play a Fairy Conclave. I heard Jerry T say he never actually activated it, and you don't actually activate it that often, but I think I activated it like a couple times on the weekend, and usually it is good just to have another beat, or sometimes it wins you the game when you're like in a damage race, for example. So I wouldn't cut those.
Vendilion Click, that spot of just a few cards is in somewhat contention over about like 5 or 6 different cards. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, these are really the variable slot. PV had 3 in his list. I cut one for Warhammer. These are really good against all the control decks, and they're actually not that bad against aggro. Say you're playing against Elves, they attack with a Renter of Vanquisher. For the blockers are declared, you play a Vendilion Click, and all of a sudden you have all the information. Like a lot of the decision making in Faeries is in regards to knowing what they have in their hand. So if you can like read people, that's really good, but you can't always do that. So Vendilion Click gives you information and lets you build the rest of your plays.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
No problem.
I'm here with Mike Long and Andrew Temple. How about you tell me a little bit about how we got hooked up?
Yeah, well, we're hanging out in the main event after we didn't grind into Nationals, and there was a block of GPT, and I played Kithkin with 3 Steel Moon Cavalier main and 4 on main. I went X11, 5-1-1, drew the last round, and was hanging out with Ruben Bressler.
That would be me.
And we were talking about the deck because he played the same thing. We played some different cards, and up walks Mike Long.
Just wanders up behind us.
Didn't recognize him, never seen a picture of him. How's it going? You know, just guy walks up. How's it going? Oh, my name's Mike. Mike Long. Wait, like the Mike Long?
Right.
Like Prosperum Mike Long? Like Drain Life Mike Long? Like the best Jedi mind trick ever Mike Long? But yeah, so we started talking, hanging out, everything from magic to the internet to girls, and then he looked at the deck, which we had laying out on the table.
We did some neat tweaking, and I got the opportunity actually to talk to Eric Lauer and another one of the designers. One of the things that you guys were trying to accomplish is trying to kind of tweak your Kithkin deck out a little bit better for the field. Obviously, the main difference in Kithkin right now, when you're looking at the block constructed format, is the Figure of Destiny, which is obviously a pretty big upgrade for the deck.
Definitely.
Now, by the end of the PTQ season with this format, I was talking to Pat Chapin about this, and Pat was saying, really talking about the dominance of Faeries. Interestingly enough, I was kind of drawing a bit of a blank as to what you could do with this deck. And actually, Andrew brought up that he had played, I don't know, was it 2 or 3 of these Jump Knights?
3, yeah.
Yeah, the Steel Moon Cavalier. And now I'd been more focused on Constructed because I was working on Dave Williams' deck for Nationals. And you know, the Steel Moon Cavalier, for me, it doesn't make the cut in Standard right now. However, for a metagame that's dominated by Kithkins and Faeries, you know, right away I kind of jumped at it. A guy who I used to play a lot of Magic with and my business partner Dave Mills, he has kind of a rule when it comes to cards, and that's one of the things that kind of jumped out at me with this card. I was talking to Eric Lauer about this. Anytime you have a card that's just totally different than anything that's ever existed, you really want to just kind of stop and take notice.
Right.
You know, just slow everything down and just say, hey, what is this? You know, it's very easy to say, oh, this is just the same as a Jump Knight or a Pump Knight.
Or Paladin Envac.
Or Paladin Envac, that's
Right.
another good example. But instead, this guy has a lot of different cards. It's actually like 4 cards jammed into one.
Exactly.
Interestingly enough, a lot of the cards in the Kithkin deck are like that. There hasn't really been a Figure of Destiny type
There
card
has not been a Figure of
printed.
Destiny
There
card.
hasn't been Still Moon Cavalier.
There hasn't been a Mirror Weave.
There hasn't been a Mirror Weave is another one.
Yeah, I think Spectral Procession is actually kind of a different card too.
Yeah. The closest thing to Spectral Procession is Rith's Charm, and no one really even played that card.
Right, so the deck
I don't even
ends
know
up-
what Wrist Charm is.
See, exactly, that's what I'm saying.
I don't even remember it anyway.
The deck starts in block as sort of a combo deck. You're playing your Mirror Weaves and your Thistledown Leeches. You're trying to blow your opponent out with Spectral Procession tokens. And then after Eventide, you get Figure of Destiny, you get Stillman Cavalier, and you get Unmake, which really increases the aggressive consistency of the deck.
Right.
Because you don't have to overextend into Fire Spout. You can have a Figure of Destiny and another guy in play, and if they Fire Spout, you've gotten 2 for 1. You just drop another guy. Or one of my favorite plays against the 5-color decks. You play your guys into fire. If they Fire Spout, you drop Stillman Cavalier. He's immune to all their singular removal.
Right.
They have to have another Wrath effect, and you don't have to play another guy because you just Pump Knight, Pump Knight, Pump Knight.
Which kind of goes back to the early days of Magic.
Exactly.
Like, the Pump Knights were kind of like some of the early important cards. The I don't know, Order of Lightbearer, Order of the Ebon Hand, the first approach to New York. It was kind of a known thing. You just play a Pump Knight. You know, the Necro decks or the White Weenie decks would just play a Pump Knight and they would rot on it and you know, take 4, take 5, you know, eventually take 6. And you're sort of forcing your opponent's hand. One of the things that we noticed right away, and I kind of appreciated this, we did a little bit of tweaking. I thought right away that we should go up to 4 of the Cavaliers in the main deck. I'm really pleased with this too. Like this is a really, really nice card for just a lot of reasons. I was looking for an answer to the Cavalier and to I wanted things that also took out the
Sower of Temptations.
exactly the sower.
Right.
We were talking about that.
Ruben suggested that you could kill sowers with it. I think.
Oh, was
Right.
that? Yeah,
Cavaliers.
exactly.
I think the extra.
Right. This was
Oh,
the
Ruben's deck. Very nice.
This was the sideboard tech. This was my main.
And by the way,
addition to
like a
sideboard.
lot of times when you're discussing decks, kind of as a team and stuff like that, you know, ideas just tend to come up. Now,
So
we
the
ended
main
up-
deviation from the most of the decks is that most Kithkin decks are relying a lot on Cloud Goat Ranger. We cut it down to 1.
I had him in one hand that couldn't cast him. I mean, obviously, it's a 1-of. You're not going to see him very often.
Did you feel like were there times, and I think that it's worthwhile to really note when you're playing
Right.
games, when we're proxying and stuff like that, or you know, when we're playtesting, oftentimes we'll say, well, this card could be this or that. So
Right.
when you draw this card, play it as this, but consider that it could be that.
Playing in the GPT before we talked to Mike.
Right.
I played against the deck, a Kithkin deck, and he main decked Order of White Clay. I asked him how that was, and he was playing it against Faeries. And the card really stuck out to me with the Stillman Cavaliers, because against Faeries, the only way they're going to deal with your Cavaliers is a Counterspell or a Thoughtseize. And then if you have this guy, it's like your second copy of him. Also, it makes all their Counterspells dead, and their removal seems very, very weak, because he's immune to Nameless Inversion.
Wow, this guy seems really powerful.
Yeah, and we're going up to 2 of those in the board today. The mirror match used to revolve around token mirror weave advantage,
Right.
but because of Stillman Cavalier's prevalence, is starting to, on the play, revolve around just racing your opponent's token generators. While my opponent has 5 mana Cloud Goat Rangers in his deck, I'm streamlined on the play, of course, into a more aggressive machine, so that he plays Cloud Goat Ranger, and the next turn he's going to 5 life.
Competitive Magic is kind of going in this direction where it's not so much the deck, like, it's not necessarily I'm playing Elves or I'm playing Fairies or I'm playing Kithkins. It's
Right.
like, which Elves are you playing? Which Fairies are you
Exactly.
playing? Which Kithkins
And
are you
this is
playing?
definitely-
What are the fine-tuned
This is
matches
definitely
that
an
you make?
evolution on the Kithkin deck.